I don't think there's ever been a better time to be a Warhammer fan. It's more accessible than ever to get into the hobby, to the point where you can really pick and choose from so many different options, no matter what your preference is. You like animation? There's the Secret Level episode, there's Astartes, and Astartes 2 is coming out next year and it looks phenomenal. You like video games? There's Space Marine 2, Dark Tide, and Rogue Trader. Maybe you like painting miniatures. Okay, that might be a little bit harder, granted, but still an option for some. One part of the hobby that's been getting a lot of attention in recent years is the books, specifically the Horus Heresy novels, of which there are approximately 2.8 million of them. They're mentioned in a lot of conversations about where to start if you're new to Warhammer 40k, but also just in terms of 40k literature, they're known for being very well written and a great way to understand the heresy from multiple different perspectives. In a lot of these discussions, the first 4 books are widely recognized as the best place to start when it comes to reading the Horus Heresy, because they cover one continuous narrative with all of the same characters, with some exceptions that we'll get to later, whereas many of the other books focus on different legions at different points during the heresy. If you're not interested in any of the Horus Heresy and just want to read books set in the current timeline, there are also a ton of different options for you in a number of different genres, covering a number of different factions. The first 4 Horus Heresy books are about the start of the heresy, the context behind it, who's involved, etc. So it's honestly the best way to start to understand this part of the lore. I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on each one, covering the events, how they're written, which one's my favorite, that sort of thing. I would recommend reading or listening to the Horus Heresy books before watching this video, because I think they're best experienced going in completely blind, and I will be spoiling all 4 books. I'm not going to be talking about what happens in the far future and who's involved in what 10,000 years from now, but I will be talking in depth about the events of each book. Without further ado, let's get into it. The first Horus Heresy book, and maybe the most well known too, Horus Rising does an amazing job at introducing you to the 30k setting. The story revolves around Garviel Loken, a space marine in the Legiones Astartes, and a member of the Loner Wolves. The Loner Wolves? And a member of the Lunar Wolves, the Legion of Primarch, Warmaster, and potential troublemaker Horus Lupercal. We mainly experience the events of the book from Loken's perspective as he navigates the life of a space marine and what it means to be on this great crusade, but we do also get the perspective from a few other characters too. Although it's quite action-packed, this is also the most philosophical of all the novels in my opinion, with many deep conversations being had between Loken and his mentor Kirill Sinderman, as well as musings from Aenus Carcassy, a remembrancer which is basically a historian/poet there to record important events for posterity. Also, if I mispronounce certain names, I'm very sorry. Please correct me in the comment section, as I've only read the books, I haven't listened to them on Audible, so I might be getting a few things wrong. Hell, I thought his name was Torgadon until I heard Bricky call him Torgadon in an episode of the Adeptus Ridiculous podcast, which you should listen to, it's really good. So I might get certain things wrong, my apologies. But this novel really dives deep into some profound questions about war, politics, religion, and legacy. And although these themes are explored throughout the other 3 novels too, I think this one in particular uses these themes to get us to understand the main characters and what they believe in. It's a great setup for us to see how they evolve over the span of 4 books. Also, the Lunar Wolves are shown to be some pretty chill guys, all things considered. It was interesting to see the difference between 40k Marines, who are for the most part these stoic killing machines, and 30k Marines, who are pretty much upbeat killing machines. I also think the novel is paced very well overall, with there only being one part of the narrative that I felt dragged on a bit too much, but otherwise it balances slower dialogue scenes with fast-paced action very well. Speaking of the dialogue though, I think it's amazing. I really like how each Space Marine has their own distinct personality to differentiate themselves from one another. Because they're all hulking superhumans built for war, I think it's really easy to see them as all being the same, but Dan Abner does a great job at making each one unique with their own beliefs and ways of interacting with their fellow battle brothers. And some of these differences play major roles in the next few books too. There's crucial subtext in so many of the dialogue scenes. Honestly, it feels a little bit like Game of Thrones at times, with characters telling each other half-truths and flaws coming out in interesting ways depending on who's talking to who. It creates this underlying tension that things aren't quite as they seem, and I absolutely love it. My favorite part of the novel by far is the Whisperhead section. It's the first time that we really get a feel for the supernatural, with the comms repeating the same message from the mysterious Samus. Then there's the fight itself, which is the first time that Remembrancers see the Great Crusade for the brutal massacre that it actually is, instead of being what was previously believed to be a heroic voyage into the stars. Then you have the fight with Jubal, the very first time that we see a Space Marine get corrupted and fight another Space Marine. Then he turns into a demon and almost kills Euphrates Keeler. It's nuts. I love this whole section. It's so well written and I genuinely couldn't put the book down the entire time. The whole sequence on Murder is kind of a wild sidetrack. Firstly, they called the planet Murder because there was a lot of murder. This is like Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands, like come on. But also, I just love the idea of the Interrex being super confused when they got to Murder. Like they found the mega arachnids, couldn't kill them outright, so they stored them on a planet only to come back and find the Imperium fighting them for no reason. It would be like finding a wild murderous bear in your backyard that you're able to imprison in your shed. Then you come back a day later to find 3 guys fist fighting it. But what happens with the Interrex is so heartbreaking. We see the Imperium actually becoming amicable with another Xenos race, and it's going so well until someone decides to mess it up. I hate Erebus so much. I've just read these novels. Outside of them I really don't know that much about the word bearers, but I know that other people hate him too for reasons outside of these novels, which just proves that he's a perpetual But overall, it's an amazing book that you should absolutely read even if you don't end up reading the other ones. Now, I have quite a bit to say about False Gods. I love this book, I think it's very well written, and I actually think it might be better paced than the first book. I can't think back to any moment that I thought was slow or meandering. It evolves the themes in a natural way, and this is very much where the heresy starts. This is also where the disagreements between characters turn into full-on divisions in the Legion. It doesn't feel rushed or forced, it feels like an organic evolution, and, much like Loken, you really get the feeling that things are starting to crumble. Not only can Space Marines not agree on how best to help Horus, but regular crew members are split between following the secular teachings of the Emperor and the growing popularity of the Lectitio Divinitatis. If that's how it's said, I don't really know, but it's this religious belief in the Emperor's power. We understood the foundations and beliefs of all of the characters in Horus Rising, and in False Gods, these characters are now forced into difficult situations where they have to pick sides and decide for themselves what they believe in. Your values mean nothing until they are tested, and these lot sure are tested in this one. Character arcs are developed a lot more through action than just through words. Loken really pulls through here. He's a lot more active, and instead of being the kind of fish out of water character that he was in the first book, he really takes a stand, with his growing confidence in character really on show here. Much like in the first book, the pacing is on point, all killer, no filler, and I really don't have much else to say about it. It's just impressive that Gray and McNeil is able to keep the pacing on such a high quality, despite the fact that in False Gods, we only really get to experience 2 planets, that being Davin and its moon. He nails it, that's it. The plot revolves around squashing a rebellion on Davin's moon. When they arrive, they have to fight Imperial officers who have become Nurgle corrupted creatures. This whole fight is incredible. The language used to describe these creatures is so visceral, I genuinely felt uncomfortable reading certain sections because it's not only gory, but it's just so gross. I like the attention to detail when it comes to the smell too. Like the smell alone of these swamps would easily kill a normal human because they cause such intense discomfort to a regular Space Marine, despite their augmentations. And these creatures don't mess around either. They overpower these Space Marines in certain instances, and there are even Marines that die in truly gruesome ways. This section reminded me quite a bit of Darktide, but actually I didn't get distracted by the visual representation of these creatures because they're actually quite different from the way the enemies in Darktide are shown. Without going into too nauseating detail, the book describes them as being a lot more worn and decrepit, with things spilling out of places that I'm not going to fully describe, whereas I find the creatures in Darktide have a lot more form to them, although I do appreciate the detail of having them spew maggots when you kill them. Very gross, and I love it. The one issue I have with the book is Horus's fall to chaos. Essentially, Horus is stabbed by a Chaos Demon with a Chaos Corrupted sword that he isn't able to heal from. He's taken to a temple on Davin, which causes a great deal of argument and debate amongst the Marines, where, during some warp-related fever dream, he has a conversation with Erebus who convinces him to fall to chaos. When I first read the book, I thought it made sense and I thought it was very well done, but the more I think about it, the more I take issue with it. Again, this is a minor thing, I really don't think it's that bad, but I do think it's a little bit rushed. I think we should have spent more time understanding Horus's grievances with the Emperor and the Imperium prior to this fall. Points that are made during this conversation with Erebus were only able to... I don't know if I keep that in instead of making myself laugh. The points that are made during this conversation with Erebus were only ever previously expressed as annoyances. Sure, he got mad about his father abandoning him and the other legions to conduct secret activities on Terra, and he also got mad at taking orders from basically admin lackeys and politicians instead of another warrior standing with him on the battlefield. But I never once felt like Horus would turn for those reasons because it never felt like they were things that truly affected him enough to make him consider turning. With all of that in mind, Erebus also lies during their conversation and Horus finds out about the lie. Erebus is initially disguised as someone else, someone he thought Horus would listen to, and Horus is able to see through this ruse, but he still sides with him. Also, Magnus Luscious Locks the Red joins the Discord server and is like, Horus, that guy is for sure lying and trying to make you join the dark side. I'm your brother, you've known me for ages, we may have had our disagreements, but lad, come on, we both know this guy is chatting absolute rubbish. Despite all of this, Horus still sides with Erebus? Again, I think it's done in a way that is somewhat believable, but I think there are some holes here when it comes to motivation and logic. And for an even more minor nitpick, the thing that really grinds my gears in all of these books is the references to future events. And I don't just mean the future events of the novel, but like the 40k setting too. From I was there the day Horus killed the Emperor, to characters actively thinking to themselves, I wonder where we'll be 10,000 years from now, it gets a little bit too on the nose. At first it was endearing, but by the time I got to the third book, it felt like the author was reaching through the book with both hands, grabbing me by the collar and shouting, do you get it? Like, yeah, I get it, chill out. But also, what if someone is reading the books for the first time and doesn't know that much about the lore? They're going to be really confused when the character makes a comment about something that seems important and is never brought up again, when in fact it's just an Easter egg to something that happens in the 37th novel. Actually, what is the 37th novel, out of curiosity? Just want to say. Oh, it's the Silent War. Ooh. But back to False Gods, I really do love it. Not as much as Horus Rising, but it's still really good, and even with my issues with Horus's Fall, it's still definitely worth the read. This one is absolutely brutal. This is the culmination of lies, treachery, divide, everything. The best way I can describe this one is just heartbreaking. This is an amazing finale to the initial trilogy, and it really gets the heresy going, but in the most insane way. This book covers one event on one planet, and even with that being the case, there was never a dull moment. If Horus Rising was a walk and False Gods was a jog, Galaxy in Flames is the 200-meter final at the Olympics. This is non-stop action, and I just love how you get these small character moments during fights, where a character will think, say, or do something that shows a little flaw or even a way that they've grown or changed over the course of the 3 books. And I love that attention to detail. Horus, having fully fallen at this point, sends those he thinks won't follow him down to Isfahan 3 and then virus bombs the planet before igniting the flammable gas immediately afterwards. An entire planet, humans, animals, plants, trees, everything is annihilated. And the description of the massacre is full on. I think it's the only way that I can really describe it. The initial virus bombing is wild, with it going into detail about how it transforms your muscles and bones into jelly in a matter of minutes. Soldiers are of course hit by this, but also civilians living in the Coral City, the main hub of civilization on the planet. Loken is sent down to the planet, and seeing the events from his and other Space Marines' perspectives is awful. It's very clear what's going to happen, and there's basically nothing they can do about it. The most heartbreaking moment for me is when Axeman expresses remorse at the end for killing his brothers. You observed notions of doubt in him before, but here he really has a moment of crisis, even if it is just for a moment. He never wanted to take it this far. He was just following the orders of the War Master, the Primarch that he swore to follow to his dying breath. In this moment, his reaction really underlines the idea that the lives of the few decide the deaths of the many. I would say that this is like Mad Max Fury Road, if it were the final film in the trilogy. It's very well written, and I think this is my second favorite next to Horus Rising. Okay, so I just need to add this in very quickly before I talk about the next book. Basically, for each book, I've done like an intro, like Space Marine for each one. So like obviously for Horus Rising, it was the Lunar Wolves. For the second one, I tried to do sort of like a Sons of Horus kind of look to it, with the Vanguard. And then with Galaxy in Flames, I just went like Black Legion as like to be like symbolic of, you know, this is where the Lunar Wolves are going to evolve to. Also, if you haven't noticed already, this isn't scripted. I'm just ranting about this. I'm recording this the day of the upload, so I'm like rushing a little bit. But basically, the reason why I'm talking about, you know, the Space Marine intros is because for Flight of the Eisenstein, it's about a Death Guard, like a Death Guard Marine, and I had recorded footage of a 40k Death Guard, and then so in editing I was like, oh wait, I got footage of the wrong kind of Death Guard because I needed a 30k Death Guard. So I made a 30k Death Guard, which you can see here. Like I fully made, you know, made one. And I was like, look, I'm just gonna get footage very quickly of like a match in Space Marine 2 with this Death Guard, and then I'll like put that in, whatever. It was supposed to take like half an hour max, maybe probably less. But every time I queued for a game, I always got chaos. And this happened, I think, maybe 5 or 6 times in a row. I'm playing the footage in the background right now, sped up, of this process of getting into a game, then re-queuing, then going back in and re-queuing. And it happened too much. I just said, like, I can't keep doing this. This is going to be how it's going to be forever. I looked online to see if this was a common thing, and it is a common thing. People keep queuing and keep getting chaos every single time, and I needed to get footage of a loyalist death guard. So, apologies if it's not accurate. This is going to be footage of a 40k death guard because I simply could not get footage for this 30k death guard. I was losing my mind. So, apologies if thematically it's not really like matching up to what I had in mind, but there we go. I just wanted to put this in very quickly to sort of explain what was happening because I was losing it. And also, why does this happen? Why every time that I queued, I was getting chaos? I don't know, like, maybe it's something to do with the Space Marine 2 servers. I don't really know what's going on because I know it's a common thing for other people as well. But there we go. Run over. I just wanted to explain very quickly why that happened in case someone maybe noticed that that it's like, oh, that's a 40k death guard and not a 30k death guard. That's the explanation. That's it. Run over. Okay, on to the next book. This one is kind of the odd one out, and I'd say that it's the least required book in the quadrilogy. It follows Nathaniel Garrow of the Death Guard as he heads back to Terra to tell the Emperor of Horus's betrayal. I still like this book, don't get me wrong, but it's my least favourite for a number of reasons. The first half of the book is a prequel, but also a retelling of the third book from a different perspective, so quite a large chunk of this book is dedicated to events that we've already read about, and the stuff that came before that is pretty good all round, but it's odd to be following completely new characters on a separate mission at the beginning. Then they're at Isstvan 3, then they're transporting characters from the original trilogy back to Terra. It all feels a bit odd, and because of this approach, the narrative structure feels a bit jagged. Some parts are paced very well, and other parts feel rushed. It feels like they had an ending in mind, and so some of the explanations and events cut corners to reach the ending. Despite all of this, there are some really amazing moments in this book. The escape from the Isstvan system is really tense, with one ship having to essentially slingshot around another planet to be able to jump away while trying to avoid fire from much bigger ships. Also, later on in the novel, when the corpses of the fallen Death Guard reanimate from Nurgle corruption, that part was wild. I didn't really like the third act of the book though. I just felt like everything was happening too quickly, and I wanted to know more about how the characters were reacting to certain events, and I just felt like that wasn't explored in as much detail. For example, Decius becoming a Chaos Demon was kind of expected. You could see it coming from a mile away, but the way his fall to Chaos is described is really rushed. He's injured for a large portion of the book, but it isn't until just before he becomes a demon that we get an insight as to how Chaos is tempting him. Couldn't we have gotten a bigger lead up to this? Couldn't it have been interesting to see Decius try to stave off Chaos at first, but the weaker he got, the more susceptible he becomes? I understand that each novel is only 400 pages, so sometimes things need to get cut for time, but this is the second fall to Chaos that feels a little bit disappointing. These issues could also be linked to my frustration at having to follow another group of characters that we just met instead of focusing on the fates of the characters involved in Isstvan 3, but I still think this novel falters in a few areas. Overall, it's okay. By the end, the Imperium knows about the betrayal, and we get the first hint of the Inquisition, which is pretty cool, but honestly I found it to be underwhelming. And that's it. From here you can jump around to any novel in the series you want. Personally, I've started reading Scars from Chris Raitt because the White Scars are my favourite Legion, but honestly you can do whatever you want. You could even read everything in order if you really wanted, although that might take a very, very long time. I think what these novels do the best is that they provide a really detailed description and analysis of how humanity was in 30k. They do a really great job at immersing the reader in this universe by detailing not only the lives of the Space Marines but also of ship crews, remembrances, pictors, iterators, and so on. When something absolutely insane happens, you get to see how a Space Marine reacts to it as well as how a Remembrancer does as well. You're able to understand how each aspect of humanity reacts to the events in each book through the different perspectives. And I think it's done so well throughout the series. Through each novel, you gain an immense appreciation of how humanity has gotten to this point. As my understanding of the setting grew, I started to realize that the heresy was basically inevitable for a number of different reasons. Humanity is so hypocritical. They're secular, but they treat their leaders as religious figures who regard themselves as demigods. In fact, they outright despise religious belief, seeing it as an archaic practice meant to instill fear and doubt. But they themselves regard science in a pseudo-religious way, where the imperial truth that states that there is no such thing as the supernatural and that rationality and science are the only truths in the universe is carried out in a great crusade, a term usually associated with religious violence against those deemed heretical or unworthy. They even have priest-like figures called iterators who are deployed to defeated planets to spread this truth, and the ships are described as basically cathedrals. The Primarchs, seen by regular humans as essentially immortal gods, are just regular people who have endured incredible hardships and who are now in charge of an entire legion of super soldiers who share their seed. God, that sounds weird when I say it like that. Many of these Primarchs endured incredibly difficult, sometimes abusive childhoods, and then a man claiming to be their father rocks up, puts them in power armor, and gives them command of thousands of gene-enhanced and augmented superhumans who endured a recruitment process so brutal that they represent just a tiny fraction of those who survived years of training. And this was supposed to be a formula for long-term success? The novels do an incredible job at highlighting how fucked up humanity is, even before the first hint of Horus's betrayal. That's why these novels are important. They provide key context of the 40k setting by presenting just how messed up humanity was from the beginning. The current setting was as inevitable as the heresy, it was just a matter of time. Whether you prefer reading or listening to audiobooks, I'd highly recommend at least checking out Horus Rising. If it's not for you, that's fair enough, but if it is, then check out the other books too. They're really well written and definitely worth your time. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.